freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 341 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Cheryl, what's our theme today?
Our theme today is political statistical trickery. Absolutely.
And our guest today is John Lott. John is a world-recognized expert on guns and crime and the author of a number of books, including The War on Guns, Arming Yourself Against Gun Control Lies. He is an American economist who served in the Trump administration as senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of Justice Programs for the U.S. Department of Justice, and then the senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of Legal Policy for the United States Department of Justice.
Absolutely. John is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, the CPRC, which is a research and education organization dedicated to providing an objective and accurate scientific evaluation of both the costs and benefits of gun ownership, as well as policing activities. John's work gives those of us who are protecting our Second Amendment rights a solid foundation of precision-focused research. Holy cow, your bio gets longer with the day, Dr. Lott, because you are constantly on the go and doing awesome work. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to talk to you guys again.
Absolutely.
I like that term, precision-focused research. And I know you, John, and that's exactly what it is too. Precision-focused. Thank you very much for doing that.
Well, appreciate you being there. Appreciate you appreciating it.
Absolutely. And I'm loving your backdrop. And I've got smaller versions of both of those. And they are awesome works that I encourage everybody to get. And I know I got mine on Amazon, but do you have another place that you would suggest people pick up your works?
Well, I mean, people can get it at Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com also, but Amazon is a good place too.
Very good. So in addition to writing books, you recently wrote an op-ed in Real Clear Investigations, and the title is, Despite What Biden Says, Guns Factor in Only a Small Percentage of All Violent Crimes. And it says that about 92% of violent crimes in America do not even involve firearms. Could it possibly be that the president is engaged in some political statistical trickery?
Well, I don't know. He just ignores the fact that overwhelmingly violent crimes don't involve guns. Mm-hmm. Virtually no rapes involve guns, for example. Lots of robberies involve knives or other types of weapons that people have. So, you know, I guess my concern was that his sole focus, or virtually sole focus, on gun crime as something that he wants to reduce, ignores the fact that people are concerned about violent crime generally increasing. And, you know, there's some obvious reasons why violent crime has increased over the last year. And if you want to go and try to deal with that, there's some obvious things that you have to do in terms of law enforcement. But his focus only on gun crimes I mean, I don't even think that the types of things that he's proposing are going to be particularly useful for stopping gun crime. I think some of them will be counterproductive, in fact. But he's missing all the ice under the waterline, so to speak, for the iceberg when he's focusing only on guns.
Absolutely. And, when federal laws get passed, it's this blanket that falls over the entire nation. And another article that I found on your website was saying that 50% of murders take place in only 2% of the counties in our entire nation. It was a very interesting visual to see the map and see where the crime and even the, if you want to call it gun crime, occurs. And it really does feel very manufactured for us to be, all of our information to be funneled and focused on something that doesn't necessarily impact the individual lives of all of the people that any new federal laws would impact.
Well, I mean, murders are very geographically concentrated in the United States compared to other countries. As you say, over half the murders occur in 2% of the counties. Those 2% of the counties represent about a quarter of the population, but over half the murders. Mm-hmm. And if you ever look at what's called a murder map for those counties, you'll see that almost 2/3 of the murders in those counties take place in about 10 block areas. So, and it's largely gang crime, drug gang related crime. And that's, if you're going to go and have a big impact on murders in the United States, that's where you're going to have to concentrate. You have over 70% of the counties in the United States have either 0 murders or 1 murder over the course of a year. And so you're right, it's for murders, it's not something that touches the vast majority of Americans. It's different for other types of violent crimes like rape and robbery and aggravated assaults. Those are much more evenly distributed across the entire country.
So John, I'm going to take a guess here. So the counties that have the most concentrated murders are probably really heavily gun related, regulated counties too, right?
Yeah, they tend to be heavily Democratic areas. They tend to be in relatively heavily Democratic states, but in particular, it's those counties that are the most heavily Democratic. So, I mean, you may have, I'm sure most people can name the places, Philadelphia or Chicago or DC or, but it's within, here's the irony is that the places that tend to have no murders mm-hmm. tend to have relatively high gun ownership rates. Mm-hmm. I don't put a lot of weight on purely cross-sectional comparisons because there are lots of other things that vary. There are reasons why you're going to have higher murder rates in more urban areas than in rural areas. But given how much the standard media discussion focuses on rural and urban areas, it's just something that's hard not to notice.
Absolutely. And, we are supposed to, according to our founding fathers, the ones that fought, bled, starved, and died to have the opportunity to write this document, we are supposed to have a representative government. And so when you look at that and you say, well, if there's this huge push under this current administration to go against gun owners, to make gun laws more stringent, more complicated, then surely if it's a representative government, there's got to be a ton of people in this nation who that's kind of a top of mind issue for them. Yet I found on your website a Gallup poll that shows that only 1% of Americans even mentioned guns or gun control as being an important problem facing the country. And only 4% even mentioned crime.
Right. Well, that's,
that
yeah,
should
for
tell
the
us
most
something.
important, if you're asked what's the most important problem, it's only 1% say that gun control is the most important issue that's out there. One thing that's interesting, if you look at other surveys, even from NORC, which tends to be very pro-gun control group, they say, what's the top 5 most important problems? And in that case, guns get into the 5% level, who say it's one of the top 5 problems that we're facing. So, it's interesting just to hear the rhetoric that's out there. And again, look, I mean, I think the thing with Biden, he's just trying to find many different ways to make it costly for people to be able to go and have guns. So, for example, one thing that probably most people didn't notice is they recently banned the importation of ammunition from certain places. Anybody who has tried to buy guns recently or ammunition, my suspicion is they realize how expensive those things have gotten. There's been a huge increase in demand as violent crime rates have gone up. People have tried to get more guns. And, it's not too surprising that they've also tried to go and buy more ammunition at the same time. You go and you make it so some of the sources of ammunition are going to dry up. You're going to make it even more costly for people to go and buy ammunition. But this is a common theme in all the different types of things that Biden's pushing, whether it be the background checks on private transfers of guns. In Washington, D.C., it costs $125 to privately transfer a gun just to do the background check on it. That may not stop you or I from being able to go and get a gun, but the very people that my research indicates who benefit the most, the people who are most likely victims of violent crime, who benefit from having a gun for protection, poor Blacks who live in those areas, $125 may make the difference between whether or not they're legally able to go and obtain a gun or not. If you want to have background checks, if you think that they're really beneficial and reduce crime, there are a couple points to make on that. One is, presumably, you want to encourage people to go out of their way to go and do the background checks. It's not really obvious to me how making people essentially have to pay what's the equivalent of a $125 tax on doing that encourages them to go out and do the background checks. The other thing is, if you think that these background checks reduce crime, then they reduce it for everybody, not just the law-abiding individual who's going out of their way to go and obey the rules that are there. And as an economist, I would say if everybody benefits, everybody should pay. The people who benefit should be the ones who pay for it. And so for both of those reasons, it seems like you should pay for it out of general revenue. If you want to encourage people to do it, don't make them have to bear the entire freight of having to do this thing that's supposedly benefiting other people. I'm skeptical that these background checks really reduce crime. I'm very skeptical of that. But if you believe that, then it seems strange that they want to set up the fee schedule the way that they have. And, but it's just, whether it's the liability rules that they're trying to change for gun makers, whether it be things like the zero tolerance policy that the ATF is going to be enforcing, where if you make any mistake, no matter how trivial, you're going to be out of business. I mean, you guys sell guns, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, I don't know how many guns you've sold over the last 10 years. You have a guess how many?
Well, I'd say that
More than
last year we probably sold 8,000 guns.
Okay. So over 10 years, let's say you've sold 80,000 guns, okay, or 50,000, something like that. Do you think that you may have made a paperwork mistakes, a trivial paperwork mistake someplace on one of those forms that were filled out?
Well, I can tell you
where the county box, somebody wrote in the city accidentally for it or something like that.
I
Because,
can guarantee you that we have done that and we've been cited for it. And
well,
this
now
last-
the difference is, at least if the rhetoric is going to be held up, they're saying they're going to put you out of business.
Right.
Biden goes and talks about, rogue gun dealers, conjuring up images of people selling guns out of the back of their store to criminals. But, this zero tolerance policy has nothing to do with it. We're talking
Right.
about trivial, inconsequential mistakes. They're going to be used to put you out of business.
Right.
So, could you just handling the paperwork, just the additional costs for you having to do that are going to make it more costly, more difficult for you to do business. And, I hope no ATF agent was listening to Dan's comment a minute ago saying that he guarantees that you guys have made some paperwork mistake like that, because, they're going to come and get you and put you out of business. I mean, if
What-
Biden's claim that they're really going to have a zero tolerance policy now for these types of mistakes,
Mhm.
they're just going to
Absolutely.
drive a lot of the gun dealers out of business, making it more difficult, more costly for people to be able to go and buy guns. And they go and they talk about, Biden will talk multiple times about 5% of the gun dealers, sell 90% of the guns that end up in crime. My guess is, and maybe you guys have the exact numbers, I'd love to get these, but I've heard that 5% of the dealers end up selling more than 90% of the guns that are there.
Mm.
Why then should you be surprised that 5% of the dealers make up 90% of the guns that are going to be used in crime? So it's just, it's kind of nonsensical, but the common theme for all this stuff is just to make it costly and difficult for people to be able to go and own guns.
Absolutely. And it's becoming more and more of a class issue based on a Rasmussen poll that, again, I found on your website, which is a amazing resource for people for all of these kinds of things, that apparently affluent people are totally fine with more laws, more of these hidden taxes in transfer fees and background check fees, and that the poorer communities, the ones that, really are the ones out there, maybe not living in the greatest neighborhoods, maybe having to drive through some dangerous
Can't
areas.
afford all these costs.
Right.
Are less
Working the
able to
night
afford all
shift.
these costs.
Absolutely. And they're saying, no more burdens on us. And it really is becoming a class issue.
They've been talking about how having an ID is costly to poor people. A $5 or $10 ID is costly. And then they're turning around, they're charging $125 for somebody who wants to protect their own life or their family.
Well, just to give you an idea, in many of these places that have these background checks on private transfers of guns, DC, California, other places, they have the background check on each gun. So let's say Dan and I lived in California, or Dan and I lived in Washington, DC, and I'm going to go and give him 4 guns. I mean, I guess it'd be more likely that he'd give me 4 guns. But in any case, if I'm going to give him 4 guns, you would think it's just one person giving one other person the gun. So it should just be one background check because only one person's receiving them.
Right.
But no, they require a separate background check on each gun. So rather than the $125 cost, you're talking about a $500 cost.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I want somebody to explain to me why that's a reasonable thing. You look at those types of rules, and it's pretty clear that the whole point of those rules is just to make it as costly as possible for people to be able to go and obtain guns. It's nothing to do with, safety that's involved with having that additional cost that's there.
Yeah, in Arizona, we don't have those kind of expenses. And we still have customers that come in the store and say, I want to sell this gun to this person who's beside him. I don't know him. I would rather we do a background check
Sure.
just for my own personal reasons. But if they charged $125, they may say, I'm not going to do that.
Right. And it's a voluntarily
Volunteer thing,
done
yeah.
thing. When the government steps in and says you have to do that, that's where I absolutely put my foot down as a individual citizen of this nation, especially when I've heard you speak several times on how fallible the background system really is.
Well, can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I'd have to use all my fingers and all my toes, and I still couldn't count how many times background checks, they came through clear, and then a couple days later, the ATF come to my door and saying, where's this guy at? He bought a gun illegal. The
John
background
says
check was
the other
inaccurate.
thing happens more often, that you're denied your rights.
Yeah,
Go
and you're
ahead,
also
John.
denied too, yes.
Well, sure. During the different administrations, during Clinton administration, Republicans attacked him for not enforcing the gun control laws. When Bush was president, Democrats attacked him for not enforcing the gun control laws. When Obama was president, Republicans attacked him. But the thing is, the number one piece of evidence that they're not enforcing the laws is they say, look, you have millions of people that have been denied being able to go and purchase a gun. And yet we only have very tiny numbers of prosecutions involved. In 2017, for example, there were 112,000 denials that were there. And there were 12 prosecutions that had occurred federally. You had a small number of state prosecutions, but they were also very small. And, the thing is, these are very easy prosecutions. If you go fill out the 4473 and, you provide your government issued photo ID and, you write down there that you're not a felon, okay? And you sign at the bottom, it's very clear you're signing under the threat of perjury that everything that you've just stated is true. What's your defense going to be if I forgot that I was in jail for 5 years and prison for 5 years?
Right.
I couldn't remember that. And even if you forgot, that's not a defense. And so all the prosecutor has to show is, look, the guy signed this form. We know it's him because he provided the ID. Maybe they even bring Dan in order to testify that in fact the guy was the guy who he looked at his ID for, and yet he was a felon and he was prohibited, and he claimed that he wasn't a felon. So that's 3 years in prison right there. It's like the simplest crime to be able to go and prove, and so you look at these and you say, well, how can there only be 12 prosecutions with 112,000 initial denials? And the explanation is pretty simple: is that they're not real cases, the vast majority of them. There's some other reasons why they dropped the cases, but there are 5 stages of review when you do these background checks and they're denied. The first stage is the National ATF office, essentially just does a paperwork check. It's no lawyers involved in the process, just checking, make sure the paperwork lines up. About 94% of the cases are dropped at that stage. The second stage is they send out the paperwork to the field offices for the ATF. Another 2% of the cases are dropped at that stage. Again, no lawyers involved. Overwhelmingly just checking for paperwork mistakes that are there. So you have 96% of the cases that are dropped in just the first 2 stages of review. The other stages are kind of a black box, but we see how few cases are even referred for prosecution and how few they actually go ahead with prosecutions on. I mean, there are other reasons why they may drop them. They may say, well, it's a particularly old crime that person was convicted of, but I've seen them go after people whose crimes were 40 years ago. And the thing is, criminals may be stupid, but they're not so stupid that they go through and try to do a background check when they know that they're prohibited from doing it. The
Yeah.
type of people that you catch are people who just didn't realize that they
Yeah.
were prohibited. I've seen cases like one case, a man who was 63, his wife had been getting threats at work and she was going to get a concealed handgun permit. So as a present, he decided to go out and try to buy her a handgun. Well, it turns out that 40 years earlier, he had gotten into a fist fight with his brother in their front yard. The neighbors had called the police. The police had come and arrested them, and both he and his brother had pleaded guilty to misdemeanor domestic violence, which is a
gosh.
prohibited offense. And, you know, he claims that he didn't realize that that was a prohibited offense. The federal prosecutor said, look, it's really clear. It spells it out that misdemeanor domestic violence is a prohibited offense. You pleaded guilty to this. You signed the form stating that everything here was exactly right. And he was convicted of perjury and sentenced to jail for 3 years.
Wow.
So now, you know, does anybody believe that the guy was really a danger, that he was some big time criminal that they caught? But those are the types of people, I believe, that you pretty much catch all the time when you're dealing with this.
Well, we've had several people ask, hey, you know, I did this thing back when I was a kid. And we say, well, check with an attorney or check, you know, somewhere, but not to fill out the form until you know for a fact, because that is perjury. But then you have others that just think that they can skip by, that, you know, they'll come when Nick's is real busy, when there's a lot of gun activity, and they'll try to slip in the crack. And we've seen people slip through the crack, and then the ATF deal with some of them later. And every case, and I could say there's quite a few, every case they told the person to bring the gun back to the store or they would be arrested, and
Okay.
nothing else was done.
Okay, well, here's the deal. I'm not even sure those were real cases. You know, just because the ATF comes to you and tells you, my guess is a lot of those are mistakes. You know, so like you see the numbers broken down that the Justice Department puts out, and they say number of people who are felons who we stop from buying guns. And they'll say, you know, it's like 80% or so of those. The thing is, I know that those weren't real felons. It's just that somebody who had a name similar to somebody who was a felon tried to go and buy the gun. That's the reason why they didn't prosecute it. So my guess is the types of cases that you're talking about are cases just like that, that it wasn't that the person was slipping through. I assume you didn't go and talk to the individual later on very much in detail about these things. Often.
They just brought the guns back, and
Right.
there's no questions asked, you know.
Okay.
We give them their money back, and
Right. So, but here, my guess is, look, I've talked to people like Reagan Dunn, who was the first person who headed up Operation Project Safe Neighborhood and stuff. And, you know, they say, look, there's a reason why we're not prosecuting these cases, because after we've gone through and done all the paperwork checks and things like that, they fall out. I mean, the types of checks, the review process I'm talking about aren't done within 2 days. These are processes that go on over many months that are there. And the thing is, you know, you go and you talk to lawyers that handle these cases, you know, somebody who they're improperly denied, they can go and challenge it. The problem is that most people who challenge it are going to find it necessary to go and hire a lawyer. Just the paperwork involved in trying to prove that you're not somebody who the government thinks that you might be. And the costs for doing that, you're talking about starting costs around $3,000 or so. I've talked to lawyers who have told me some cases that they've handled have been $10,000. So you may want to have a gun, okay? But is it really worth $3,000 for you to go and appeal? There are a number of cases where people start the appeal and just say, you know, this is getting crazy in terms of the legal costs that are here, and they drop it along the lines. But the thing is, you overwhelmingly, the error rate for Black males from data that I saw when I was at the Department of Justice is about 3 times their share of the population. For Hispanic males, the error rate is about 2.5 times their share of the population. And, when you're talking about, $3,000 fees to fix something that is in no way their mistake, you may have a lot of poor and even middle and maybe even upper middle income class individuals who just say, look, it's just not worth it for me to go and fix this mistake that the government made. I'm just gonna let it go.
Wow.
So I'm sitting here feeling a level of frustration because you had just said that the Biden administration wants a zero tolerance, that when they come and they audit our books as a FFL, a federal firearms licensee
Right.
gun store, zero tolerance. They can put us out of business for, the county bit being written wrong. But yet the ATF, the FBI check, this NICS check, they can have all of these mistakes. And who does it cost? It costs, again, the individual. It doesn't cost the ATF anything to make mistakes. Right. This is a huge imbalance. And
Right.
This is an unelected body. And things are not as they should be. And this
Right.
is such a glaring example of it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I couldn't have phrased it better than you just phrased it. And, and the thing is, who is it stopping from being able to go and buy guns? And I would argue it's disproportionately stopping the most vulnerable people in our country.
Mm-hmm,
and the thing is, it's a simple thing to fix. Gun control advocates talk about that they just want reasonable gun control laws. Well, I'm suggesting reasonable fixes to their gun control laws, and they will fight you tooth and nail against those reasonable fixes. So if private companies, I don't know if you do background checks on your employees at your store, but if you were to have an error rate that was 100th the error rate that the federal government has, you'd be sued out of existence. Would you go and use roughly phonetically similar names to do and similar birthdays to do background checks on your employees? I assume not, right?
No.
I mean, if I suggested that you do that, you'd probably look at me like I was nuts, I would assume. But yet, the federal government does that. So my suggestion over the years has been simply require that the federal government has to meet the same standards for doing background checks that private companies have to meet. I mean, what's the argument against that? Back when the fixed NICS bill came up, I tried to get some US senators, Ted Cruz's office, for example, to go and push for that requirement. And my understanding is that when they were doing negotiations over that with the Democrats said that that would be a poison pill to go and include that the federal government, let's say I'm wrong on everything. What's the argument? Why not have the federal government have to meet the same standards for doing background checks that private companies have to meet?
Right. They're fighting
if it's
for
good
some
enough
standard.
to require that private companies have to meet that, why not for the employees? I mean, why not for the government? But I've come to the conclusion over time that rather than an error in the system, I think gun control people actually like the fact that it's costly to go through the background checks. I think they like the fact that there are these errors there because they're all accomplishing their ultimate goal. It's the same thing as these other things that we've talked about, whether it be the zero tolerance policy or whether it's be, the fees or whatever that's there. Their goal is just to make it as difficult and costly as possible for Americans to be able to go and add guns. And there's like no limit to the number of different costs that they're desiring to impose.
Absolutely.
That no tolerance thing scares the heck out of me because I remember, and I was young, so I was young, so I don't remember quite, but there was a deal, they pushed that 5 years mandatory sentence if you use a gun in a crime. If you use a gun in a felony, it's 5-year minimum sentence. And so then I think there was a story where a guy was felony speeding. He was going over the speed limit, which in Arizona, I think is 90 miles an hour in a in a 70 is technically felony speeding. If you had a gun in your car, you could have got 5 years for that. It depending on the judge to decide how far to enforce that law. Mandatory stuff is really scary.
Well, I mean, there's zero tolerance. As I say, any mistake, no matter how trivial, no matter how inconsequential to, criminals getting guns, even if it's not even involving a criminal getting a gun in any remote sense of the word, would put you out of business, would make you lose your license. And, it's just mindless stuff, just they wrap it up in words about rogue gun dealers. And,
it's ridiculous is what it is. Yeah.
Right.
but it's
Well,
just
John,
true.
there is on the CPRC website, there are a number of mentions of censorship that you're experiencing. What are those censorships?
Well, I mean, we've run into social media censorship a couple of years ago. Both my Twitter account and the CPRC's Twitter account were blocked by Twitter because we had pointed out that the New Zealand mass public shooter, the mosque shooter there, was a left-wing environmentalist nuts job. Everybody wanted to go and claim that he was a right-winger. We linked, or I initially linked to an article that we had posted that quoted some parts of his manifesto. I mean, he was an environmentalist and he hated minorities because he believed that minorities tended to have more children and that having more children was bad for the environment. So he wanted to stop minorities. And so I wrote an article in New York Newsday, which is not exactly a right-wing publication. And then I tweeted out that article from the CPRC Twitter account, and Twitter locked that account then. I tried to point out to Twitter, I said, look, other people have tweeted out the New York Daily News piece. Even the New York Daily News has tweeted out the piece. You haven't locked any of those accounts. You haven't locked any of the accounts for people who claiming that the New Zealand killer was a right-winger. You haven't locked any of the accounts where people have selectively quoted a few parts of the manifesto for the New Zealand killer. But they seem to be particularly upset about my argument, pointing out that the guy was an environmentalist. The guy's ideal form of government was the communist China. He hated companies. He wanted companies abolished. I don't know, maybe you know a lot of right-wingers that think we should live under communist Chinese government.
None come to mind.
Know too many. And or that we think we ought to kill minorities because they have too many kids.
Oh, gosh.
But in any case, so anyway, recently I was involved in a little bit of a debate on Twitter where somebody was citing Newsweek as a source for saying that the New Zealand killer and the El Paso Walmart shooter were both right-wing white supremacists. And I tried to point out that, they were environmentalist white supremacists that were there. Why not call them environmentalists? Because the El Paso murderer cited the New Zealand killer as having the exact same views that he had. And if you read the El Paso shooters, manifesto or write-up, it was pretty obvious that he was the same views on everything. But Twitter wouldn't let me post that. So, and they let people post the link to Newsweek, but they wouldn't let me post the link to the New York Daily News article. So, in that case, it seems like they have algorithms or something that instantly check the type of stuff that you're trying to put up. So, I assume it has an impact on people's views. People wouldn't be going and making claims that these guys are right-wingers if the news media was able to be somewhat balanced on this stuff. But anyway, that's enough on that. But
That is frustrating.
It's terrible. I mean, there's so much fake stuff going on Twitter right now that they let go through.
Right. The only fact checking going on seems to be
On the gun side.
Yeah, or on the conservative side. But anyway, so we'll start wrapping up now. But over your career, you have had many impressive accomplishments. And certainly, as we're just now saying, even with something this simple as just trying to share somebody else's news story, right? It has not been an easy road going against some of the negative pushback, especially from some of the Bloomberg financed gun control propaganda machine out there. But what would you say is one of your most impactful and proud moments?
oh, I won't even try to guess. So, just try to do what you can. But I appreciate you asking.
Well,
So,
your humility, I think, speaks for itself. And
I think all of them, everything he's done has been, just really good stuff.
it really has. I mean, being asked to join, administration, any presidential administration, but especially, I think, the one that most recently seemed to be moving America a little bit closer to what our founders had idealized for our nation. That must have been especially.
no, it was nice. I mean, I wish I'd been able to be there longer than I was, but
Yeah,
well, I appreciate your time.
absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. So, John, tell folks how they can follow the work that you're doing.
Well, they can go to our website that you've cited many times during this discussion, Crime Prevention Research Center. It's at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all that you do and continue to do. And we look forward to having you on again.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The guy, you know what? If he tells me something, I believe him, because he won't tell you anything until he has researched it and knows what he's talking about.
So true.
And so sometimes it's difficult because it's
so
like,
true. Do you remember?
well, no, Dan, you kind of, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you remember he came to ASU, I believe it was, Arizona State University, and you have to use the word debate in air quotes, had a debate with a local politician. I have to call him a politician because he's not a public servant. He's not acting as a representative of his constituency about, why more gun laws are important. And, Dr. Lott, he comes with, PowerPoint presentations. He's got charts.
Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts.
Yes, charts and graphs. And, he's got all of this information. And he says, well, here is the information. You can pretty much draw your own conclusion. I can help you to understand what these graphs are saying, but the conclusion to be drawn is yours, basically, right? But it was pretty clear that as one of his books is called, more guns does tend to equal less crime, and that there is a war on guns, and that there are lots of gun control myths out there. So the person that Dr. Lott was debating, here's how he starts his sentence. Well, I looked up on Google last night and I have no idea what the rest of his sentence was, because I just sat there with my mouth open thinking,
looked up on Google.
This is the level of your research. This is the level of your dedication to really ruining other people's lives.
You know what? Google does research on Dr. Lott. It's not the other way around.
I like it.
When Google needs information, they go to him.
I like it.
They don't use it all.
And so this is somebody who is willing to write legislation, that this other person that Dr. Lott was debating, write legislation, back legislation, pass legislation that is going to impact the individual lives of his constituents. And he says, I Googled last night. It's based on a Google the night before.
The night before.
Absolutely unconscionable, unacceptable. And too often we allow that. We keep voting these people in. We keep letting them do these things, and we just shrug it off like it doesn't matter until it really does matter. And I think we're at that moment with this particular administration and all that they would like to do to trample the Second Amendment, including the nomination of this David Chipman guy to the head of the ATF, who is clearly a partisan person, clearly not interested in upholding any oath that he might end up taking to protect and preserve our Constitution.
Well, he's not going
and
to
our
be
Bill of
taking it.
Rights.
Okay.
He's what?
He's not going to be taking the oath.
Well, he probably did in one of his other jobs, but
Well,
I hope he doesn't get
please,
this particular one.
Please, no, I'm
But
sorry. I heard
anyway.
they're hiring at Arby's. Okay. There you
That's
might be able
great.
to do okay.
That's great. Why don't we pick a restaurant that, well, Arby's is okay.
Yeah, Arby's is good, but they'd hire him
Yeah.
as
Maybe.
long as he kept his
We'll
mouth
see.
shut.
All right. We got to get out of here. All right. Thank
Thanks,
you
John Lott.
so much to Dr. John Lott. He's amazing. All the work that he does is amazing. Be sure to go to his website, the CPRC, Crime Prevention Research Center.org. I'm sure it's an org. And thank you so much to all of our listeners all over the planet, people who are hungry for the information that our subject matter experts provide us with. Thank you so much for that hunger,
I think
for
we
your
probably
time.
have more research tools in our website of all the people that we interviewed than all of Google as far as accurate information.
That's an interesting thought.
You know,
I
so
don't
instead of Google,
disagree with you. We've
just
had
go Gun Freedom Radio and check it out.
we've had some amazing subject matter experts who have trusted us with their time, and you trust us, our listeners trust us with their time, and we so appreciate you. Thank you so much.
So maybe Google's going to come to us to get information.
Probably maybe we should fact check Google,
Yeah.
right? We'll have our fact checkers get on Google. All right.
Or we'd find some information that's not quite
Yeah.
that, and Facebook. Well, Facebook's pretty accurate if you're living in a fantasy, right?
I don't even want to go there.
Let's just pray for our nation.
Yeah, I like it.
Pray for our leaders
Yeah.
and pray that John Lott can, fight through the people that argue with him and
Oh, he
show logic.
does
I mean, he does.
beautifully.
He's awesome.
He does
is.
beautifully. Oh, and I also forgot to say, if you like watching
Oh,
our shows, video
Of course we
version,
do.
please be sure to check out our YouTube channel and GunStreamer. GunStreamer is sort of the freedom-friendly version of YouTube. Please subscribe, and with your pinky up, press the notifications button. Right? Everybody else says smash that button, and I'm saying, with the pinky up, do that. And also on the OpsLens smartphone app, our show appears on there. And if you like strictly listening to the audio, because maybe you're, doing work, you're at the gym, you're working out, whatever.
Yeah, the gym.
Hmm?
Where? The gym?
The gym, there is such a
Did they have a
place.
snack bar there?
I've heard. I've heard of them. I need to get there
What, the
more
snack
often,
bar?
at least once. Yeah, the snack bar.
Yeah.
And anyway, if you like listening to the audio only version, please go to our website, gunfreedomradio.com, click the on demand tab, and binge listen to your heart's content. Again, we mentioned the guest tab that has all of our guests that we've ever had on there. It's a tremendous resource. We do not hate it when you spend time there. All right. I hope you guys really are taking up our weekly challenge to engage in prayer for our nation and the people who are doing what they can to make it ever better, ever stronger. All right. Until next time, have a great week. Be good to each other, and God bless.